We're standing along the Atlantic Highlands section right now, the Henry Hudson Trail. This is the section that was heavily damaged during Sandy. I am Richard Pillar. I'm a landscape architect with the Monmouth County Park System. I'm part of a design department of 7 people, 4 landscape architects, 2 engineers, and 1 architect. And we try to do as much design in-house as possible. So I'm just one of the designers, and I have been working on sections of the Henry Hudson Trail in the past few years. And so I've been tackling the new projects and the old projects along this trail. Before Hurricane Sandy, this trail was pretty much on its own. There's nothing you could have done. Everything was supposed to have been done through the design of it through the former engineers, and did receive other damage from northeasters. So we know that this section of trail is highly vulnerable from northeast storms, and surely Hurricane Sandy is going to have a real detrimental effect. Nobody knew it was going to be this detrimental where it wiped out every bridge along the trail. Right after Hurricane Sandy, there's a priority of listing of park projects and sites that have to be taken care of first before we actually tackle a site like this. One of the biggest, our 2 biggest sites that we wanted to work on was 7 Presidents and the Marina. Those are highly public facilities, a lot of users, and they're revenue generators. So those are things that we have to pay attention first. So it wasn't up until May of this year that we could actually start sending a crew out and start tackling some of the debris and seeing what the damage was. We had done some previous damage assessments, so we know it was extensive, but it wasn't up until that point that we were able to come out here, start dismantling some of the broken bridges, and at some point during the summer we came to a standstill because there was some complaints about what we were doing, digging ditches and things of that sort, and that was all temporary measures in our viewpoint, just trying to get access to these points, because there was a lot of water drainage features that got destroyed, and we needed to divert the water in order to have vehicles to come out to these points to start taking care of the damage. A half a foot of erosion at the base of a slope is not going to cause a slump block failure. That starts from the top. And it starts from, major forces of drainage and everything else. For all the complaints about putting a ditch down at the bottom of the slope there, that's the best thing for the slope to keep a slump block failure. So we filled in the ditch. So water is what makes the slump blocks call to action. So if you can provide adequate drainage, that helps that slump block failure out. The one that we had last year in the spring of 2012 was after a major rain event. And that occurred in a heavily wooded section, very steep, but that wasn't even associated with a house or anything. That was just natural lands that fell apart. So if you imagine if you start building houses and roads on a slump block failure, you're asking for problems. We've had geologists looking at it, but basically our trail's on the flat bottom. Our property line ends at the toe of the slope. This little trail has nothing to do with what happens to the slump blocks. There was some unclarity with the state permitting and everything else, so we stopped all our activity in regards to cleanup along the trail. At this point, we're the last day in September, and we do have all that cleared up, and we are actually going to start very shortly. We start removing the remaining debris that's along the trail here. From what we've seen, the damage of Hurricane Sandy is that maybe we don't want to put this trail back the way it was. And that's where the confusion lies for a lot of people out there. If I had the money and the contract ready to go tomorrow, I could put the trail back the way it was. We've had some incidents out here that we know that it's vulnerable, so we're trying to rethink of how we can put this trail back without the bridges. That's our main goal. So in order to do that, it's a whole re-permitting process. So we have contacted the DEP. They will be out here shortly to walk the trail with us. And we're going to start saying, how can we put this together under their guidelines of Wetlands and Coastal Review Facility Act? How can we put this back, with a less structure-minded trail, which basically means taking out the bridges? DEP never proposes anything. They will give you guidance and expect you to come back and tell them what you want to do. And they will say yay or nay. And basically they're following the federal wetlands laws. And so if there's ways we can do that, they will say yes. I mean, we're looking at the changed conditions out here. What happened when the trail was put in? What happened after Sandy? What's happened in that meantime? So again, we're going to be helping each other out. But, they don't really, they sort of show you a way and you have to say what that way is back to them. I asked them point blank, how do we go from here? And they couldn't give me an answer, and then they finally said, well, we have to re-look at the wetlands that were originally mapped on the trail. Does that original mapping make sense in light of the storm, in light of the artificial conditions out here, the old railroad bed, and the areas that we want to fill? If you think about it from day one, that the railroad bed is raised up over the original ground, 6 to 7 feet, that does a lot to shore up the the hillside. For us to come down here with a few pickups and some, cleared out the top of the railroad bed, which really didn't have any vegetation, and graded off, we didn't even cut anything. We added more soil. So in anything, this trail helps the slope. We are going to make an effort to get rid of the debris, and we're actually going to try to actually start putting some of the quarry dust surface back over the top of the trail. So, and right now I think our game plan is to try to stabilize those areas, but leave out the areas where the bridges were, because that's the part that we have to go back for re-permitting with the DEP. We want the least amount of bridges, so if we have to put bridges in, we have to negotiate and re-look at those areas that the smaller bridges were located and try to figure out how we can put them in. The construction details that were originally designed to put these bridges in, when they actually got out here in the field, they found that they couldn't actually even build it as per plan. They were supposed to have big, long pilings, and when they came out here, because it's on the old railroad bed, there was so much ballast that they could not drive the pilings. So they did certain things called helical piles, or sort of screws that go in the ground, structural screws that you can build upon. Some areas, just as even over here, they couldn't even get the helical piles in, and they had to do short concrete piles, which became very vulnerable to the storm damage. So again, it's when we're going to do it. I was lucky if at the end of 2014, maybe into 15. Again, I think DEP is going to help us out permitting this and expediting it. FEMA is willing to help us at this point, but they've backed off because they know it's a complicated project out here. So they won't start doing our finalized paperwork until we have a clear direction what the DEP will allow us to do and what they won't allow us to do. Our main issue right now of keeping people off the trail is because there's a lot of safety issues. There's piling sticking up, those helical piles are standing up, there are trip hazards. I mean, some of these things are sharp edges, there's all a lot of debris in here. So, I mean, basically we're concerned about safety hazards at this point. So if we can remove the safety hazards, then we might open the trail up again. So we're asking people to stay off. And, it's a section. We like to try to have the whole section open at once instead of incremental sections of that section being open to the public. It may come back as a rough trail, again, as a wilderness trail more, so to speak, because, if we remove everything, we're not going to fill until we get a blessing from DEP to do that. So again, if you're maybe willing to get your feet wet, it may be open from that, but that's another decision that we'll have to make, a later point, once we get everything cleaned up.